There was indeed breaking news tonight. The British government has decided to block Scotland's, what some would say is controversial changes to the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. It was basically a bill, if you've not been following it, which means that kids as young as 16 can self-identify to be the opposite gender. The Scottish nationalists said that any attempt to block it would be, I quote, an outrage. John, you are indeed yourself Scottish. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I think it is absolutely right that the UK government shows that it is in charge. The devolved Parliament of Scotland is not independent. It's not an independent country. If you pass a law which conflicts with UK law, the government has the right to come in. I also think it's very interesting that the SNP have been unable to persuade the public in Scotland. Recent polling shows that at the end of this big debate in Scotland, massive public debate in Scotland, the public are 2-1 and 3-1 against the major proposals that the SNP have passed. So it's interesting they want to pick a fight on this because they're not going to be that popular with the public, I suspect, over all of this. In the end, this is a policy that Theresa May initially came up with, and the Scottish Government have carried on doing the same thing as the UK Government. It's the UK Tory Government that have changed and decided not to make this change. It's a very minor change. Only 30 people in Scotland last year applied for gender recognition certificates, and that number may increase to 100 or so. But it's for a very small number of people, some of the most vulnerable people in the country. It's a sensible and modest reform, which is why Theresa May was for it. So when Theresa May and Nicola Sturgeon agree, I kind of go, well, I probably agree with both of you about making this change.
Well, Theresa May was initially, correct me if I'm wrong, I think she was initially in favour of it. She talks about it. I don't think, correct me again if I'm wrong, that it was in the manifesto. This is all about 2017. It all kind of came about, didn't it?
It was the 2017 government were for it, and it didn't. And there's still some Tory
and then they had the consultation about it,
ministers.
and then the UK government decided not to progress with it. They did make tweaks. For example, they reduced the cost of a gender recognition certificate, but they weren't, as a government, as a UK government, they weren't in favour of the proposals that matched what Sturgeon did.
The Scottish Government proposals have gone in a particular direction. I think that they're right and humane for trans people who are able who've had to wait, who are actually waiting for treatment, have massive waiting list for gender reassignment surgery. There's all kinds of issues involved in there, and I think this is going to be an interesting battle where the Scottish Government are out of touch with the Scottish public, and the UK Tory Government are in touch with the Scottish public, and who's going to win the battle between representatives, say they speak for Scotland.
Indeed, and we've just, Sturgeon's responded to this. I'll come back to you in a second on that. But Dominique, what's your thoughts on it?
I think it's completely right that this has happened. I agree with what was just said about the government sort of asserting its leadership here, because if there is a bill that it deems incompatible with the laws that we make in Westminster, I think it's only right that it's blocked. But my personal thoughts on the bill itself, I think it's a disgusting bill. As a woman, I think it's a dangerous bill. They rejected many provisions that would seek to protect women and vulnerable children, really, against sexual predators. And it's funny that any concern about this is painted as transphobic. And a lot of the time, it's men, really, that don't see an issue with this. And, of course, a lot of men that seem to be on the left don't have an issue with this because these issues all disproportionately affect women. When we're talking about trans people, we're talking about over 70% of these trans people who are biological males. So that means they're going to be wanting to access female spaces. You've got sex offenders that will and have exploited our existing laws here to be able to enter in female prisons. And this issue will only get worse in Scotland. And the argument about it only being a small number of people, that may be true, but as this is being popularised, this whole idea that you can pick and choose your gender and it's being spread to kids, those numbers of people saying that they have issues with gender identity have steadily increased. I mean, just look at the scandal with the Tavistock clinic. So I really do praise the government for taking this step.
Are you in favour of the changes, the bill that was passed? Would you support, for example, Sturgeon and what she was trying to do?
Yeah, I'm broadly in favour of what the Scottish Government have passed.
Are you?
Yep.
So don't you have any concerns? Because I'm not, just to put my cards on the table, I'm not in favour of it. I side with a lot of what Dominique's just said. I think to allow a child, of course, trans people exist. They should absolutely be treated with dignity, care. I do feel like I need to add that caveat. But to say to someone, just a 16-year-old child, you can now just change your gender with no real checks and balances, as long as you just, I don't know, put a skirt on and call yourself Sharon or whatever for a few weeks in Scotland, you can change your gender. I think that has huge ramifications and it doesn't have the safeguards.
16-year-old children are adults in the health service in Scotland and in England. 16-year-old, when a child becomes 16, they're making their own decisions about their health.
A child at 16, for example, in this country, you can't even get a lifelong tattoo.
I know, and I think that I'm personally opposed to the Scottish Government policy of giving 16-year-olds the vote because they ban them from sunbeds as well. So we've got a very confused view about adulthood in the UK. But for the health service, and it's been for a very long time, at the age of 16, you are independent from your parents in terms of making decisions about your health.
But I don't see this as...
But that's for me, that's the one that some people are focusing on. I think for 30 people who are probably some of the most unhappy people in Scotland, to change this and to make it a faster process, I think that's actually a benefit for people.
But what is it actually achieving for people as young as 16? Because when we talk about health issues, we're not talking about going to the doctor because, you've got a bit of acid reflux or something. Yeah. We're talking about lifelong and irreversible changes that these people want to make to their bodies and to their hormones. And a lot of this isn't popular, but a lot of these issues stem from mental health. The idea of not feeling as though your mind and your body are in sync with each other. And a lot of the time when these issues are investigated, and we've seen the rise of detransitioners as well, many of them wanting to sue the people that were so ready to allow them to make these lifelong changes. What they found is when they actually make these changes to their body, they're still not happy. So I think the first thing that we should be doing with all of these people,
making people happy,
is to investigate what the issue is mentally first before you start wanting to pump people with hormones and have them surgically remove their genitalia.
So I think you're absolutely right that people's personal individual needs need to be dealt with, and the whole person needs to be looked at. There's massive waiting lists in Scotland for access to mental health services, access to psychological support, psychological services. One of the things the SNP spend their time and effort on is trying to pick fights with the UK government, not trying to make life better for people in Scotland. And there's something there are across Scotland. It's between, I think it's 3 to 5 years waiting for gender reassignment treatment. So this is the change in the certificates. Something does need to be done about the waiting. Something needs to be done about the access to mental health services. And I do think it's a very small number of people who are some of the most unhappy, picked-on people in the whole of our country. And I think that the use of trans people as a political football by some of the people in the debate in Scotland, I'm not saying it in this discussion, I think, is respectful of all the complex perspectives here, is, I think, a bad thing. I don't think it can be good for people. And so from that point of view, I agree with Nicola Sturgeon that the people who abuse children and the people who assault women, by and large, are men, heterosexual men. They're not...
Yeah, I think for me, the bit that I found a bit peculiar is because I do believe that there are lots, well, not lots, I do believe that there is a small, tiny, probably minority of people who do have, a medical condition, gender dysphoria, or whatever you want to label it as. And I just therefore don't understand why they've removed that. Because if what you're trying to do is protect genuine people that are trans, why would you remove that aspect of it?
Because it's ideological for them.
You speak about Nicola Sturgeon, and I'm interested in this angle to it, because Nicola Sturgeon has responded to this on Twitter. She says the following, this is a direct quote from Nicola Sturgeon. This is a full frontal attack on our democratically elected Scottish Parliament and its ability to make its own decisions on devolved matters. The Scottish Government will defend the legislation and stand up for Scotland's Parliament. If this Westminster veto succeeds, it will be the first of many. Now, I sense, it's very obvious, that this is now going to become, John,
Yep.
because there's loads of people that actually, quite frankly, A, haven't even read into what this bill, B, don't really care, and C, their immersion is stronger about Scottish independence than it is this particular issue. When you see this Section 35 being invoked, this is actually devolution working as it should, as the Constitution is defined and as everyone has signed up to. But this is now going to be weaponised to say to a number of Scottish people that believe in independence, see, look at what Westminster do. They're overruling you. Well, they're not, actually. They're just following their process. Do you think this will become a tool, a benefit for the people that want independence?
I thought the wording that Nicola Sturgeon had in that tweet is very, very interesting. If she thought she had a legal basis for challenging the UK government, she'd be saying in that tweet, we're taking this case to the Supreme Court. We'll see you in court. She didn't say that. She's making it into a grievance, a fight, because I think she understands that the powers are there, because you can make decisions on devolved issues, but some issues which do impact on equality law is UK-wide. You can't make decisions that impact on it. And I suspect that the Tory government, Sunak's government, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government, have got some strong legal advice. Her attempt to do this is also dealing with her own party. A lot of things that Nicola Sturgeon does is about party management. Her party is split on this issue. Some senior figures like Joanne Cherry, who's an MP down here, Joanna Cherry was forced to be not able to stand for a parliamentary seat in the Scottish Parliament because she is critical of this legislation. Nicola Sturgeon doesn't want to be opposed. Alex Salmond and his Independence Party that broke away, they oppose these regulations. This issue splits the SNP. I know with 2 and 3 to 3, 2 and 1, 3 to 1 opposition in Scotland for these moves. A lot of SNP voters are against this. A lot of SNP members, and I think this is an attempt of diversion, and it's a shame. Nicola Sturgeon won't defend the policy, so clearly she's worried that she's got no legal footing for this, and the UK government are in the right. And maybe it would have been better if, within the first 4 or 5 years of the Parliament, this had been done before. But the Scottish Government have been stopped by the Supreme Court for doing things that are outside the powers of the Scottish Parliament. The powers are, and Danielle said it, Dominique, you said it, it's not unlimited. They're not unlimited at all.
And I found out it'll be fascinating to see, but this is going to get galvanised, isn't it, as a weapon for anyone that's basically, if you're even teetering on the edge of independence, you're not quite sure, because it is split really, isn't it? Scotland about half and half-ish, depending on the poll. It is going to be weaponised now, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. But I think using this legislation as sort of a battering ram for independence, I think was the wrong call. I think Nicola Sturgeon at this point is a bit drunk on power. I can sense with the way she's behaved with this, acting like a tyrant even within her own party with regards to this legislation. Lord only knows why she's so hell-bent on it, but I have a feeling it's really not going to attract more people to the independence cause if these are the sorts of decisions that she's going to be churning out. Yeah.
Are you in Scotland, by the way, tonight? If you are, what do you think to the goings-on of the last kind of few months, this evening, the response from Sturgeon? Are you someone that's followed this bill and you feel passionately about it? Are you someone on the other side that couldn't care less, quite frankly, what the bill is, but you'll go with the Sturgeon line?